Hello and welcome back to The Awakening, is what I'm calling it. The Awakening. And this is session number 2, which I'll be entitling The Birth of a Nation. Session 1, you would have already watched, I hope. And I'm calling that one Tracking Israel. Tracking Israel. And lesson number 2 here, now we're calling The Birth of a Nation. And so let's pick up right where we left off with lesson 1. We left off with Jacob. Those of you that have watched would know that that's where we kind of pressed the pause button. Now we're going to press play and continue. So now we have Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. In the course of time, Jacob goes to find a wife. And he actually ends up having 2 wives. 2 wives. And with these 2 women, he had child after child after child after child, son after son after son after son, until he has actually 12 sons. 12 sons. But I want us to be not going so quickly to first just grasp, if we're talking about the birth of a nation and where Israel came from, first of all, that was the name given to a man. And therefore the name given to a family of people. That was their ancestral name, Israel, starting with a man whose name was Jacob, and his name was changed to Israel, overcomer or prince with God, as we would have stated in lesson 1. So now, and again, everything that I'm saying now, if you read the book of Genesis in the scriptures, that's where you'll find it. Right there in the Bible, right there for your perusal, for your reading, for your understanding. But this is where a lot of us err, is because we simply don't read the word for ourselves. We depend on what someone else says to teach us. And by and large, hey, we hope people have good things to say in instructing us, but the better part of studiousness is to look it up and read for ourselves. Just open the Bible and begin to read the book of Genesis, and you'll say, wow, that's what he said. That's where it is, right there. So this man, Jacob. Now, the Bible says that Israel favored Joseph above all of his other brothers and sisters. So quite naturally, having sibling rivalry, as most families do, and knowing now that dad favors the youngest one above all of us. In fact, the Bible talks about the fact that Joseph would kind of go back and report to his father what his other brothers were doing. So that was not necessarily the way to win friends and influence people. So if the sibling rivalry wasn't bad enough, God sends Joseph 2 dreams. 2 dreams. In one dream, to kind of just give you again the encapsulated version of it, the dream told him that his brothers would bow down to him. His brothers, older than him, would bow down to him. And he told them the dream. And they're like, really? Is that right? We are going to bow down to you? And you think this is true and this is what God has said to you in these dreams? Well, if that wasn't bad enough, God sent the second dream. And in the second dream, it was revealed that not only would his brothers, but his mother and father would bow down to him. Would bow down to him. And so that didn't go over with his parents too well either, as you might imagine. And so there began to be a little bit of disdain, we might say, in the family for Joseph, the youngest brother. Until one day, his brothers conspire together and they say, let's take this dreamer and kill him. Their own brother, their own flesh and blood. So they took him and threw him down a well. And they all, conspired together and said, okay, we'll kill an animal and put blood on Joseph's coat, a special coat, by the way, that his father had made for him. The Bible calls it of many colors, so it was like a coat of favor above his other siblings. So they say, let's take his coat and put blood on it, and we'll tell our father that he was killed, by a wild animal. Yet they conspired and threw him in a well. And by the providence and grace of God, one of his brothers says, this is not a good thing that we've done. Here comes a caravan that's headed towards Egypt. Let's take him out of the well, so let's not kill him. Let's get him out of the well and sell him into slavery, basically, with this caravan that's headed to Egypt. And that's exactly what happened. So he gets sold to a wealthy man named Potiphar, an Egyptian, with this caravan, and he's taken out of the well and then sold down the road into slavery. His own brothers did this now. Remember, key element to follow in tracking with this biblical narrative, that his own brothers sold him into slavery. Now, some time passes, about 13 years to be exact. So Joseph would have been about 17 when this atrocity took place. Now, about 13 years passes by, and through the course of God-ordained happenings in Joseph's life, in his 13-year journey, he's in slavery, he gets falsely accused, he gets thrown into prison, but because God's favor is upon his life and he's diligent in everything that he does, everywhere he goes, he prospers, even in prison. Because of his heart, his attitude, his diligence toward God. So because of that, God elevates him. And again, you can read the whole narrative in its entirety in the book of Genesis, but I'm just talking to you right now, just putting some truth into the narrative that's going out into the world. And we're coming to it, trust me. So, God, in the course of time, over the course of 13 years, elevates this man, Joseph, to second in command in Egypt. Only second to Pharaoh. Here's Pharaoh, there's Joseph. Second in command. Now there begins to be a famine in the land. A famine that's affecting the region. And so now let's kind of switch back or change scenes back to Israel and his 12 sons. Remember them? Israel and his 12 sons. They're all named in the Bible. You can read their names. But let's switch back to that scene. So now they're starving because there's a famine in the land for years, like 7 years. There's a dearth. There's no grain. There's no crops. And starvation is beginning to set in. So Israel says, go down to Egypt because I hear there's grain there, and get us some provisions. Okay. They say, yes, sir. And they set out and go down to Egypt where there is grain and there is provision. That is when or where we will end lesson number 2. Join me as we continue in lesson number 3.